The Quran, Islam's holy book, weaves intricate tales of prophets who shaped history and delivered God's message. Among them, Musa, or Moses as he's known in other Abrahamic traditions, stands as a towering figure. His life, filled with trials, miracles, and divine encounters, offers profound lessons for humanity. This essay delves into the story of Musa, focusing on a specific incident involving the Sabbath and its implications. The story of Musa, as with all prophets in Islam, is not merely a historical account. It's a narrative designed to teach moral and spiritual lessons. By understanding the context, the symbolism, and the consequences of the events described, we gain insights into God's nature, the human condition, and the importance of faith and obedience. Musa's story begins in ancient Egypt during a time of oppression and tyranny under Pharaoh's rule. Pharaoh, fearing the rising influence of the Israelites, decreed that all newborn Israelite boys be killed. Amidst this cruelty, Musa was born. His mother, guided by divine inspiration, placed him in a basket and set him adrift on the Nile River, trusting in God's protection. The basket carrying the infant Musa eventually reached the riverbank near Pharaoh's palace, where it was discovered by Pharaoh's wife. Pharaoh's wife, moved with compassion, convinced her husband to spare the child. Musa was raised in the lap of luxury within Pharaoh's palace, surrounded by the finest things life could offer. Despite this privileged upbringing, Musa never forgot his true origins. God had chosen him for a special purpose, to deliver his people from bondage and guide them towards truth and righteousness. His life in Pharaoh's palace was a preparation for the challenges and triumphs that awaited him. The Quran narrates a powerful story about a group of Israelites who transgressed God's commandment regarding the Sabbath, the day of rest. As a consequence of their disobedience, they were transformed. The Quran describes this transformation using the phrase like apes, a phrase that holds deeper meaning than a literal interpretation. In classical Arabic, the language of the Quran, the word for ape carries connotations of regression, loss of intellect, and a descent from a higher state of being to a lower one. This transformation wasn't merely physical, it was a spiritual and moral degradation, a reflection of their inner state. Section 5. The Sabbath Breakers, a test of obedience. The story of the Sabbath breakers is recounted in the Quran to illustrate the importance of obedience to God's commands. The Israelites, even after witnessing countless miracles and receiving clear instructions, chose to defy God's law for worldly gain. This act of defiance was a blatant disregard for the covenant they had with God. The Sabbath, a day designated for rest and spiritual reflection, was turned into a day of labor and material pursuit, highlighting their misplaced priorities. Section 6. The Curse of Transformation, Divine Consequences. The transformation into apes was not a random punishment. It was a symbolic representation of the spiritual state they had descended to. By choosing worldly desires over God's commands, they lost their moral compass, becoming consumed by greed and self-interest. This transformation was a stark reminder of the consequences of straying from the path of righteousness. It underlined the principle that true freedom lies in submission to God's will, while disobedience leads to spiritual and moral decay. Section 7. The Righteous Remnant, Upholding the Covenant. The Quran makes a clear distinction between those who broke the Sabbath and the righteous Israelites who remained true to their covenant with God. This distinction emphasizes that even within a community facing trials, there will always be those who remain steadfast in their faith. The righteous Israelites, despite witnessing the fate of the Sabbath breakers, continued to uphold God's laws. They served as a beacon of hope, demonstrating that even in the face of adversity, remaining true to God's commands is the path to salvation. Section 8. Saturday of Rest, a day of trial. The concept of Sat, the Sabbath, predates the Quran. It's a day of rest observed by Jews and Christians, originating from the biblical account of creation. In Islamic tradition, the story of the Sabbath is linked to Prophet Dawud, or King David. During Prophet Dawud's time, the Israelites were tested by God. They were forbidden from fishing on the Sabbath, but abundant fish would appear in the water only on that day, tempting them to break the rule. This test highlighted the struggle between worldly desires and obedience to God's commands. Section 9, Divine Guidance and Rejection Lessons from the Prophets. The Quran emphasizes that God, in His infinite mercy, sends guidance to all humanity through chosen prophets. However, the choice to accept or reject this guidance rests with individuals. The story of Musa and the Sabbath breakers underscores this fundamental principle. While Musa was chosen to lead the Israelites out of bondage and towards righteousness, he couldn't force them to follow. Their transgression of the Sabbath commandment and the subsequent consequences exemplify the human capacity for both faith and defiance. Section 10, Conclusion, Enduring Lessons for Humankind. The story of Musa and the Sabbath breakers, as narrated in the Quran, offers timeless lessons for all humankind. It teaches us about the importance of obedience to God's commands, the consequences of transgression, and the significance of remaining true to our covenant with the divine, even in the face of adversity. It reminds us that true freedom lies not in pursuing worldly desires, but in submitting to a higher purpose. Ultimately, the story of Musa serves as a powerful reminder that our choices have consequences not only in this life, but also in the hereafter.